Boker Tov, Shalom Aleichem, everyone. Glad to see you this morning. Hope you're being blessed, being encouraged, having a great and amazing day today. It is the second day of the Rosh Hashanah Hasidim we talked about yesterday with respect of the Alter Rebbe being set free from prison. And so we are blessing you with a celebration today as we celebrate everything that comes from our Hasidic viewpoints, Hasidic ideas. We bless you with all of that. We're going to be looking today at the story of Judah and Tamar. Very interesting story that kind of supplants itself in the middle of this story of Yosef and the betrayal of his brothers. We have this interesting story of Judah and Tamar, and really about the sprouting forth of Messiah from yet another kind of, interesting event. I mean, at the end of the day, as you're going to find out, Judah rather, is going to have relationships with, someone who he thinks is a prostitute. And from that event is going to come twins who are going to be directly in the line of the Mashiach. Again, one of those moments where you look and say, wow, the zamach, the sprouting forth of the Messiah, we saw this in Sodom, and now we see it in this story, seems to come from a rather kind of, I don't know how else to say it, kind of unholy, ungodly means. I mean, Judah and having this situation. Of course, we can look at this story and say, but Tamar was disguising herself and she had good reason to do so. And yet still, the intention of Judah is what it is. So it's a very interesting story. And the other question is, why does the Torah, because everything in the Torah is absolutely divine, so why is this story kind of in the middle of this situation with Joseph? Well, that's because the story of Joseph is really teaching us about the suffering Messiah. It's giving us the pattern, the picture of the suffering Messiah. And while the suffering Messiah is developing, if you will, and that story is manifesting, simultaneously you have Judah come along and create, if you will, the Mashiach ben David. So it's just kind of an interesting overlap, but we're going to get into this story. Before we do that, we're going to say good morning and Boker Tov to all of our faithful who are watching the program today and being a part of everything. Glad that you're here. It's so important for you to be here, because if you weren't here, then I wouldn't be here, because there'd be no reason for me to be here. So good morning, Kim. Glad you're here. Good morning, Shoshana Brenner. Hope you and Zake and Yigal are doing great. Good morning, Chris and Crystal. Speaking of people who have come here to visit and to see behind the curtain, you came to Oz to see the wizard. We're off to see the wizard, the wonderful wizard of Lapid. And you look behind the curtain, that would be Chris and Crystal. They were here. They came as well. Good morning, Sergio. Sergio came as well. Sergio's been here at least once. Been like 1,000 years ago, Sergio. I'm not really sure why you haven't been back. So there's somebody else who's been here. Who else do we have? Hannah, Boker Tov. Anna Smith, Boker Tov. Aliyah, glad you're here. In Windy, Missouri. Hope you and Shmuel are doing great. Good morning, Robin, Caleb, Boker Tov. Good morning, Elisheva. Elisheva's been here as well. Yonina, formerly from Georgia, Boker Tov. Good morning to Miriam. Miriam has been here as well, and she had no head injuries while she was here. As it says, she apparently had a head injury. May you recover quickly, and may your shiner go away in the merit of Messiah Yeshua. Good morning, Jubilee. Good morning, Jacqueline. Sarah and Shane Merritt. Hope you guys are doing fantastic. Good morning to Greg Kroon, who will soon be here. Leslie Dykes, Boker Tov. Sonia, Boker Tov. Keturah, hope you and Z-Ray are doing great. Good morning, Amana. The Rebbetzin, the little butterfly. Oh. Good morning, Baraka. Good morning, Roy. Boker Tov to you. Good morning, Kristal. Jean, Boker Tov to you. Hepzibah. Hepzibah's been here as well. She's come as well. Baruch Hashem. Good morning to Micaiah, Boker Tov. Glad you're here. Good morning, Levi. Of course, Levi's been here with all of his fam. And Yosef and Joe, Boker Tov to you guys as well. The other people who've been here were the Collins, Yitzhak and Zahava. They've been here as well. So we have so many people that's come and been a part of everything. And we welcome you to come if you're thinking about making a trip and would like to be a part. Nellie Grace, Boker Tov. And good morning, Ed. You're singing to yourself, I wish I could be there. You can be here. You just have to make it happen. Sometimes we have to just make it happen. That is true, by the way, in life. My experience has been is that sometimes you just have to make things happen. You just have to say, we're gonna do this, because if you just kind of say, well, one of these days, then everything will get in your way and it'll never actually come to fruition. You just have to venture forth. All right, so the scripture says here in the fourth Aliyah, which begins in capítulo 38, it says, it was at that time that Judah went down from his brothers and turned away towards an Aldumite man whose name was Hira. There Judah saw the daughter of a prominent merchant whose name was Shua. He married her and consorted with her. She conceived and bore a son, and he called his name Er. She conceived again and bore a son, and she called his name Onan. And yet again, and she bore a son and called his name Shelah. And it was in Hezib when she bore him. Judah took a wife for Er, his firstborn. Probably not the best name in the world, by the way. Your name is Er, or But anyway, I digress. Her name was Tamar. But Judah's firstborn, was an evil man in the eyes of Adonai, and Adonai caused him to die. Then Judah said to Onan, consort with your brother's wife and enter in levirate marriage with her and establish offspring for your brother. But Onan knew that the seed would not be his, so it was that whenever he would consort with his brother's wife, he would let it go to waste on the ground so as not to provide offspring for his brother. What he did was evil in the eyes of Adonai, and he caused him to die also. Then Judah said to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow in your father's house until my son Shelah grows up. For he thought, lest he also die like his brothers. So Judah has what could be reasonably considered a legitimate concern here. And that is that Tamar is like a kind of a black widow. That she is part of the problem. Of course, Judah doesn't know, or maybe he does, but we presume he doesn't, that his sons were evil. And he's thinking, there's something wrong with this woman. She's making bad soup. Her coffee in the morning is, let's say, tainted. So anyway, Tamar went and lived with her father's house. Many days passed, and Shua's daughter, the wife of Judah, died. When Judah was consoled, he went up to oversee his sheep shears. He and his Adulamite friend, Hira, to Timnah. And Tamar was told as follows, behold, your father-in-law is coming up to Timnah to shear his sheep. So she removed her widow's garb from upon herself, covered herself with a veil, and wrapped herself up. She then sat by the crossroads, which is on the road towards Timnah, for she saw that Shelah had grown up, and she had not been given to him as a wife. Okay. When Judah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, since she had covered her face. Evidently, I guess, in those days, harlots cover their face. So she detoured to her by the road and said, "Come, if you please, let me consort with you." For he did not know that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, "What will you give me if you consort with me?" He replied, "I will send you a kid of the goats from the flock." And she said, "Provide you leave me a pledge until you send it." And he said, "What pledge shall I give you?" She replied, "Your signet, your wrap, and your staff that is in your hand." And he gave them to her and consorted with her, and she conceived by him. Then she arose, left, and removed her veil from upon her, and she put on her widow's garb. Now Judah sent the kid of the goats through his friend, the Adulamite, to retrieve the pledge from the woman, but he did not find her. He inquired of the people of her place, "Where is the prostitute, the one at the crossroads by the road?" And they said, "There was no prostitute here." So he returned to Judah and said, "I did not find her. Even the local men said there was no prostitute that hang out there." So Judah said, "Let her keep them, lest we become a laughingstock. I really sent her the kid, but you could not find her." And it was when about 3 months had passed that Judah was told, "Your daughter-in-law has committed harlotry. And moreover, she has conceived by harlotry." Judah said, "Take her out and let her be burned," or as we say in French, burned. As she was taken out, she sent word to her father-in-law, saying, "By the man to whom these belong, I am with child." And she said, "Identify, if you please, whose are this seal, this wrap, and this staff." And Judah recognized, and he said, "She is right. It is from me, inasmuch as I did not give her to Shelah my son, and he was not intimate with her anymore." And it came to pass at that time that she gave birth, that behold, there were twins in her womb. And it happened, as she gave birth, one put out a hand. The midwife took a crimson thread and tied it on its hand, saying, "This one emerged first." And it was as he drew back his hand that behold, his brother emerged. And she said, "With what strength you asserted yourself." And he called his name Peretz. Afterwards, his brothers, on whom hand was the crimson thread, came out, and he called his name Zerah. And that, my friends, is the end of the fourth Aliyah. Let's go all the way back to the beginning here of Rabbi Monk's commentary and look at some insights as it relates to this very fascinating, very interesting story of a woman who is supposed to, if she evidently wants to be in Judah's family. She's married to the eldest and the second eldest, and she's waiting for the young one to grow up, which, by the way, that's interesting, isn't it? I mean, she's obviously an adult woman. We don't know how old she is, but we could presume that she's, I don't know, she's at least in her early teenage years, maybe 15, 16, 17. Women married very young in antiquity. Shelah is probably just a young boy. And so, that's an interesting thing, all of it in of itself. And then we have Judah, who cohabitates with her, and as I said before, thinks she's a harlot or what have you. And from that we get this offspring that's going to become eventually the Mashiach. So it says here in Rabbi Monk's commentary, it was at that time. So why is this account placed here, interrupting the story of Joseph? It is to teach us that the brothers deposed Judah from his leadership when they saw the grief of their father. So this is very interesting. So I want you to think about this, because as we go through these stories, I want you to think about the spiritual picture of the Mashiach. I told you before that the only Messiah who's universally despised in Judaism, the one that you cannot believe in, is Yeshua. Well, we know this as we look at the story of Joseph. They despised Joseph, of course, and they said, "You'll never be the boss of me. You'll never be the king of me." They kicked him out of the playground. So therefore, the king Messiah, in this case, Messiah ben Yosef, was rejected. But what about Judah? What about Mashiach ben David? Well, we see here that he was also deposed. So in this one Torah portion of Vayeishev, we have both Mashiachs, Mashiach ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David, both rejected, both dethroned. Now, both Messiahs, Messiah ben Yosef and Mashiach ben David, are the same Messiah. It's a twofer, as we say in Texas. You get two for one. We call it a twofer. So this is spiritually saying that the Messiah is going to be rejected, okay, in totality. We don't want you to be the Messiah ben Yosef, and we don't want you to be the Messiah ben David either, okay? Now, it says, they said to Judah, "It is you who told us to sell him. Had you told us to bring him back home, we would have listened to you." So the brothers, isn't this so common? Everybody's in on the gig until it goes south, and then all of a sudden they blame the leader. Well, you're the one who, this was your idea. If you would have said not to sell him, we would have just done what you sold it. Really? But anyway, Sforno emphasizes more explicitly Judah's responsibility in the action taken against Joseph. His culpability was great, and his wrongdoing in destroying the peace of the family now turned against him. Right in his own household, death and jealousy among the brothers broke out, measure for measure. With the loss of his own sons, Judah will come to know the cruel suffering that he caused his father. So Judah went down. So coming after the sale of Joseph, Judah's moral downfall occurred, aggravated by his material decline, marks the lowest point in the destiny of the family of Abraham. The future seems tragically jeopardized, and the horizon appears bleak. So this is interesting too, because what do we see right after Joseph is betrayed by the brothers? What do we see? We see Judah fall. Now, this is a spiritual picture, of course. Why? Because Judah is, of course, representative of Israel, because it's the tribe of the king. All Jews, regardless of your tribe, are called Jews. Listen to me, please listen to this. All Jews, I don't care if you're from Asher, if you're from Zebulun, if you're from Gad, Benjamin, you're a Jew. It's impossible to be an Israelite and a Hebrew and not be a Jew. These are synonymous terms. The only people who disagree with me, please listen, are uncircumcised Gentiles. The only people who teach that you're only a Jew if you're from Judah are people who aren't Jewish, who aren't Jews, who aren't Israelites, who aren't Hebrews. They're Gentiles, okay? You need to understand this. The origin of this idea that a Jew is only from Judah, the origin of that, the soul of that theology is anti-Semitism. It's demonic. It's historically false, by the way. Biblically false. It's false even with respect to just the history of civilizations. Okay? Sociology, if you will. Anthropology. It's just biblically false. So with that said, Judah represents the entirety of the Jewish people. So what do we see in the pattern? Because we have to pay attention to the pattern, because the pattern shows us the reality. What do we see? We see that when we reject the Messiah ben Yosef, then Judah falls. And that's exactly what the commentary is saying here. Immediately after this decision came the fall of Judah. Now, the church has taught that, because we Jews rejected our Messiah, put a fork in us, we're done. God has rejected us as a people. We're destined for damnation. We're lost. We're cut off. We're spiritually blind. All of that is phony, baloney, plastic banana, good time, rock and roll. That's all ridiculous nonsense. I want everybody, if you believe that, if you're watching the program today or somebody has gaslighted you and you believe that, I want you to read 2 particular chapters of Torah, okay? There's other places you could read this and be set free, have your mind be set free, but here's the 2. Leviticus chapter 26 and Deuteronomy chapter 30. In those 2 chapters, God makes it crystal clear that even though we fall and even though we sin and even though we rebel and even though we're cast out, we will be redeemed. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. The people of Israel will never be replaced in exchange for another people. Ironically, Hosea makes this crystal clear, and Paul lied to you in Romans chapter 9 and told you that when it says that God is going to redeem the people of Israel and make them his people again, Paul told you that was about Gentiles, but in fact he lied because it's not about Gentiles, it's about Jews. And by the way, somebody, I want to read this comment to you that came in on the channel before I continue reading this inside here, because somebody put this on the channel because I was making this point that in Romans chapter 9, Paul lied to you. In Romans chapter 9, Paul is quoting from Hosea, and he says, as it's written in the scripture, I'll take a people who are not my people and make them my people. He's basically trying to say that Paul is making the argument that the Gentiles are now the people of God. And by the way, this is what the scripture says in Hosea, the book of Hosea. So I was making the point in a teaching that Paul is lying to you because that's not what the book of Hosea says. The book of Hosea never says, ever, even mentions anything about Gentile people becoming the people of God. It says that the Jewish people who had fallen and had become not his people because of our rebellion, that he will take them back, and the people who are called not my people will be his people. Okay? It's talking about Jewish people. So I was making this point. Somebody put this comment, and I think the comment is interesting because they're trying, I guess, to refute me, but in their refutation, they're actually affirming what I just said. The person says thus: this is a silly objection. Paul is using the Old Testament quote for its underlying principle. He is changing the objects in the quote, but keeping the principle, just like how he's done with every other reference in this chapter. Have you been following along? Now, ladies and gentlemen, that person just affirmed everything I just said. I'm like, yeah, I told the person, I agree with you 100%. Absolutely. Paul is taking the references from the scriptures and changing their meaning and changing it's actually subject, not object. He said object, but changing their subject. That's the proper English. Yeah, 100%. And somehow this guy thinks that's awesome. And in fact, no, that's what liars and charlatans do. They take scripture and misuse it and misapply it and tell you that it means something it doesn't mean. That's exactly what Paul did. I agree. And so I thought that was funny. But anyway, so it says here, however, the history of our people teaches us with numerous examples that providential help comes just at the moment of deepest despair. For God creates the cure before he creates the illness. This comes from the Talmud Megillah 13b. God, whatever your problem is, God already has created the cure. He created the cure before the problem existed. It says and the prophet Isaiah exclaims in his vivid style, before she had travailed, she, the daughter of Zion, brought children into the world. Before beginning the first exile, Providence was preparing the light of the ultimate Redeemer. And so just as the sale of Joseph to Egypt led to the Egyptian exile, the Torah mentions Judah's marriage, the marriage from which will come Peretz, forefather of the kingly line of the house of David, ancestor of the Messianic dynasty, from Ruth 4:18. So in other words, right here in the story of Joseph, we find the seeds of the Mashiach ben David. So here's something that, listen, I was listening to an anti-missionary last night. We were watching a debate, and there's lots I could say about that, but I'm not going to. And I was listening, and I was thinking about this Torah portion this week. One of the arguments that is constantly and continuously made by the anti-missionaries against Yeshua is he cannot be the Messiah because, he didn't do what the Messiah was supposed to do. Well, what's the Messiah supposed to do? Well, the Messiah is supposed to come and, basically bring world peace and reestablish the kingdom of Israel on the earth and all that kind of stuff. That's true. End all wars and everything. That's true. But what they don't understand is that here the pattern is with respect to Yosef. Looking at Yosef. With this story of Yosef, this begins the Messianic future. Let me put it this way. Ladies and gentlemen, the Messianic future, the Messianic salvation begins with exile. You say, well, wait a minute. I thought that the Messiah is supposed to be the Redeemer, is supposed to create a Geula. That's right. But before that Geula begins with us being in exile. You ever notice that God said we're going to be in exile for 400 something years, 410 years, and then, but when you do the math, we were only in Egypt for like 200 years, something like that. So rabbis say, wait a minute, I thought we were supposed to be in exile for 400 years. Yeah, but if you do the math from Isaac, the math equals 400. So the point I'm trying to make is that Joseph is the Messiah ben Yosef. Okay. Him going to Egypt and our subsequent decline to Egypt is all part of the Messianic vision. And eventually we will be brought out of exile by Mashiach ben David, but that's the final redemption. So what happened to Yeshua? Yeshua was rejected by his brethren. What happened nearly immediately after that? In the grand scheme of history, nearly immediately. The exile. And so you see, well, he can't be the Messiah because he didn't do what the Messiah was supposed to. Yes, he did. He did exactly what Yosef has done. And where do the rabbis say that the Messiah is? Right at this very instant, right now. If you look at rabbinic literature, where is the Mashiach right now? At the gates of Rome. At the gates of Mecca? No, the gates of Rome. Why? Because this exile that we're in right now today is the Roman exile. It's the exile of Esau. So the Mashiach is where? At the gates of Rome. Not in Rome. He's not in Rome. He's not of Rome, but he's at the gates of Rome. So here we see that spiritual picture where in this story of Tamar, that the Messiah is being, the seed of Messiah is sprouting forth right in the middle of the story. I think you could probably say this is maybe the spiritual picture of Messiah ben Yosef goes to the tomb, and then next thing you know, in the middle of this story of Messiah ben Yosef, we have the resurrection of Yeshua. Kind of like a spiritual picture there. So it says, once again, providential action is seen manifesting itself among and above the comings and goings of men's lives. The greatest purpose of history are born in the secrets of silence known to anyone, for blessing reigns only upon those which are hidden from sight. So it says, the daughter of a prominent merchant. Our commentary to 3735, in our commentary there, Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish holds that the term Canaani, used here in the sense of merchant, as in Hosea 12:8, for it is inconceivable that Judah would marry a Canaanite woman, going against the warnings of Abraham and Isaac from Pesachim 50b. So in other words, it's the idea being that she wasn't necessarily Canaanite, but she was a merchant. Onkelos and Rashi adopt this interpretation, but the question still arises, why does the Torah make a point of telling us that Shua was a merchant, and why does it describe him as such, with a rarely used expression that can be taken in two ways? We can assume that by stressing the Canaanite origins of Judah's wives right at the beginning of the chapter, the Torah wants to draw our attention to the same relationship as those previously explained in our commentary above. The royal lineage of the house of David, noted the Midrash on that occasion, descended on its maternal side from the perverse city of Sodom. It goes back to the daughter of Lot, who, through an incestuous union, gave birth to Moab, the forefather of the nation from which descended Ruth, David's ancestor. Now, just as the maternal side of the dynasty of the future Messianic king was tainted by sin, so too the paternal side was affected by Judah's wrongdoing. He married a Canaanite woman, and this was the beginning of his fall. As the Torah shows, he cohabited with his daughter-in-law, and from this forbidden union came Peretz, the paternal ancestor of David, according to Ruth 4:18 through 22. In order to understand the minds of all men of all races, in order to inspire them with a deep love of God, the future Redeemer of mankind will no doubt have to carry a drop of non-Jewish blood in his veins. And in order to be the supreme arbiter of justice and altruistic love, he must also have witnessed error and sin right in the ranks of his own family. Boom. This is why Mashiach has to come from Sodom on his mother's side, and from this forbidden relationship on his father's side, because he has to have a drop of non-Jewish blood, and he has to have that experience in order to be able to draw all men unto himself. This is phenomenal. It's like I've told you before. People are drawn to those with whom they can relate. And Mashiach comes from a family line that's just kind of a mess. We haven't even talked about, I just went blank, Caleb's wife, Rahab. We haven't talked about Rahab. That's who I was thinking about. Rahab, known throughout all history as Rahab the harlot, but in fact, she wasn't just a harlot. She actually ran a brothel. She was what they call those madam. She was a madam, as we say in American culture anyway. I don't know if that's universal, but in any case, isn't this just fascinating? So it says that it was in Chezib. Rashi explains a place name, and I think that it is because she stopped having children there that the place was called by this name, because it means cessation, disappointing, or deceiving. If not, then what does it come to teach us? But in his comments on this, Maharal does not consider that the fact that she stopped having children there is sufficient justification for teaching that the place was called Kisiv. And so it is appropriate to see in this detail a hint that Judah's wife was physically still capable of having children, and if she ceased bearing, it was the result of an act of providence which pursues its historical designs and carries them out that come what may. Mentioning the name of the place where Judah's wife had her last child, therefore, serves to remind us that this whole account fits the pattern of a vast providential plan. In other words, Shua died because Hashem needed this whole situation with Tamar to happen. Now, let's go and look at Tamar, okay? She descended from Noah's son Shem and was a beautiful palm, Midrash Haggadol. The word Tamar means palm. While the wife of Judah is never mentioned, but only called the daughter of Shua, his daughter-in-law is known only by her name, Tamar. Indeed, Tamar was distinguished by her personal worth, whereas the other was nothing more than her father's daughter. Philo of Alexandria tells us that Tamar was brought up among idolaters and converted to a belief in one God, as is confirmed in Sota 10a. So Tamar is one of these unique individuals, oftentimes women, who are right in the heart and midst of idolatry, and yet on their own come to a conclusion that this ain't right. Something's wrong here. Now, ladies and gentlemen, I was talking about this we were having this conversation with Yochanan and Tirza. Many of you are in the same situation. Your whole family are idolaters. Let's just throw it out there. You're the only one that is looking around and you see the matrix. Well, why you? Why can't anybody else see it? I don't have the answer. I don't really know. I don't know. But Tamar was one of those people, and she, on her own, converted to a belief in the one true God. And this is why God chose her to become this ancestress of the Redeemer himself. It says the high rank attained by her descendants was due to her chastity and her virtuous life. Her parents, who were not slaves, had come from Palestine, Syria. Now it says, some authors compare Tamar's character to Rebekah's. Both were motivated by a great determination. Both did not hesitate to resort to ruse. One in order to ensure that the paternal blessing would go to the son whom she knew was most worthy of it. The other to ensure her perpetual attachment to the family of Abraham. You know, Tamar just wanted to be part of the family. Tamar did not want to become some discarded widow. And that was her motivation. Her motivation was she wanted to be part of this family. And ladies and gentlemen, there are people out there who will fight to be Jewish. Fight to be Jewish. And there's others who want to play around with it. Play around with a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Oh, I like this aspect, but they don't really want to be Jewish. They want to kind of play around with some of the little halakha or some of the traditions because it seems to accentuate their Christian belief. And there's others who want to fight to be Jewish. You want to fight because you want to stay inside the family of Abraham. And you're not willing to let it go. And those are the people that stay. There's even a Midrash about this that says that in the end times, there will be many Gentiles who will put on tefillin and put on tzitzit, meaning that, you know, they'll adorn themselves in the trappings of a Jew. But when tribulation comes, you know, like anti-Semitism, as an example, they will throw off their tefillin and throw off their, you know, tzitzit and say, oh, I'm not Jewish. And it says, Hakadosh Baruch Hu will laugh at them and mock them. So it goes on to say here about Tamar, even after losing both her husbands, Judah's sons, Tamar had but one desire, to have the joy of founding a branch in the Holy Family of the patriarchs. Many generations later, her virtue still served as an example when Boaz married Ruth. The townspeople blessed him in the words, "May your house be like the house of Peretz, whom Tamar bore to Judah." So Tamar actually her name became part of a blessing. Isn't that amazing? Because of her actions, she became, hey, my name will forever be a blessing. May you be blessed like Peretz, who Tamar bore. Another insight here, she covered her face. This detail is mentioned twice with her covering her face, which prompts the Midrash to conclude she kept her face covered when she was in her father-in-law's house. She was so virtuous that he could not have suspected her. Later, Rashi adds, because she lived virtuously in the house of her father-in-law, I have decided that she will give birth to kings, and I have decided that the royal lineage in Israel should come from the tribe of Judah. Okay? This royal lineage goes back to another woman, Ruth the Moabitess. Just like Tamar, her piety and her virtue predestined her to be the ancestor of kings. These two women, who became the matriarchs of David, Solomon, the Messianic kingship, were widows and had no other desire than to ensure that their dead husbands' names and posterity would endure. To this end, one showered her attention on her father-in-law, in whom she found the soul of her husband, and the other did the same with Boaz, her husband's uncle. Out of love for their dead husbands, motivated by the purest ideal of giving birth to a holy and righteous man, they performed the mitzvah of Levirate marriage. Accordingly, God gave his assistance to these two women, and they became pregnant from the first union. And so their union became definitive despite the empirical character which Judah had wanted to give it, and despite the problem of legitimacy for Boaz regarding Ruth's Moabite origins, as recorded in Yevamot 76b. Consequently, Judah no longer separated himself from Tamar. Now, it's interesting, isn't it, that if you look at all the matriarchs, you look at Ruth, Tamar, Rahab, and then Naamah later, who was going to marry King Solomon from the tribe of Ammon. You look at all these women, what do they all have in common? You could throw in the mix, if you'd like, Bachya, daughter of Pharaoh, who was the surrogate mother of Moses. What do they all have in common? They're all converts. Every single one of them. This is the if you think about the power of those who convert to Judaism, think about the meaning of those who choose the God of Israel. You know, in the Messianic world today, and of course the church as well, but the Messianic in particular, you're told that you can't convert. And then you're told you shouldn't convert. Paul told you that whatever status you found yourself in, you should remain in that status, which of course is absurd. And by the way, contradictory, but I don't have time to get into all that. And yet, if that same advice, if someone told Tamar, you can't convert, you shouldn't convert, what if they had said that to the matriarchs? What if they had said that to Bachya? What if they had said that to Rahab, to Ruth? What would have been the outcome? Of course, there are some lunatic Messianic teachers who try to say that Ruth was actually a Gentile and she didn't convert. And in so doing, they completely nullify the entire lineage of the Messiah. But again, I don't have time to get into that. But that's about the stupidest thing I've ever heard in my life. And it is absolutely true that that's what's taught in the Messianic circles, and it's completely ignorant. It would, if Ruth is a Gentile, then she can't marry Boaz, and all of her children would be illegitimate, which would include King David, to say the least. And if King David is not a Jew, then he can't be king. And if he can't be king, then he can't have the Messiah. So, I mean, it's really, really dumb. Of course, why do they say such dumb things? Well, because they're trying to make Paul make sense. That's what it all comes back to. When your focus on is making a man kosher, this is where you make these kinds of huge fallacies. So, but in any case, it shows you the beauty of the convert and how the convert works, not just in God's plan, but is foundational to God's plan. Now you can see why the Satan would want to create a false gospel that at its core, the foundation of it, if you think about it, if you really put it all together, the foundation of this false gospel is keep Gentiles Gentiles. Why? Because he has seen what happens when that is not the case. Because every time a Gentile becomes a Jew in his universe, he sees that it leads to great messianic things. It's incredible. Now, one last insight here. Couple more insights anyway. It's talking about this whole situation. I find this so fascinating. So she went by the road, she dressed up like a harlot, and she stood there. It says Rabbi Yochanan wrote that Judah was about to pass by, but God sent an angel of lust and said to him, "Where are you going, Judah? From where then will the kings come, and from where will the redeemers be born?" This is from the Midrash Rabbah. Our sages explain, Rambam have clearly stated that all forces, dispositions which reside in the body are called angels, much more the forces that are active in the universe, and every force has a certain definitive action. Here, the natural and physical forces are also called angels. Be that it as may, Rabbi Yochanan's word emphasized once more that mysterious intertwining of providential action and human action occurred. We have already mentioned this importance at the beginning of the sections, meaning here that if we've already said that this whole situation was providential, and now we have an insight brought down from one of the sages that God actually sent an angel to inspire Judah to want to cohabitate with this person who believed to be a harlot. And this is incredible. Okay. She asked for his signet, his wrap, and his staff. Why? It says, as if inspired by prophecy, she asked for 3 objects which became the insignia of her descendants. She asked for the signet ring of loyalty, the cloak of the judges of the Sanhedrin, and the scepter of the Messiah. And of course, the Satan tried to stop this from happening. He, caused this. He was trying to get Tamar burned at the stake. Why? Well, of course, because if he can get Tamar burned at the stake, then it would be the Messiah. Okay. So here, last thing. It was Shem's tribunal which was sitting when Tamar was about to be executed. So Shem is sitting here at the head of this tribunal. Remember Shem, the son of Noah, sat on the ark? And when she sent the 3 pledges to her father-in-law, Judah was one of the judges. He rose to his feet and declared, "With your permission, my brothers, I proclaim here and now that man is dealt with measure for measure, be it for the good or the bad." So Judah's about to make teshuvah, and he's doing so publicly in front of, can you imagine how embarrassing this must have been? But he goes on to say, but happy is he who recognizes his sin. It is because I dipped Joseph's coat in the blood of a goat and brought it to my father, saying, please identify it. Is it your son's shirt or not? That I must now identify before this tribunal to whom this ring, this garment, and this staff belong. But it is better to be humiliated and punished in this world than in the next, before my father. So therefore I acknowledge that Tamar is indeed innocent. She is pregnant from me, not because she yielded to any illicit passion, but because I did not give her my son Shalach. When Judah finished speaking, a voice rang out from the heavens and proclaimed, you are both innocent, for it is by the divine will that this entire thing has come to pass. Now Judah was rewarded for admitting his sin publicly and removing suspicion from his brothers. From then on, he was able to have his share in the world to come. Judah's eldest brother Reuben followed this example and formally confessed his sin against his father, thus clearing the brothers of all suspicion. His name Yehudah then acquired its full significance, resulting from the double meaning of the root hodah, to think, and to admit. God definitively associated his name with Judah's, thereby showing his affection for those who had the moral courage to confess their sins publicly. This comes from the Talmud Sota 10b. End of our Aliyah today. I hope that you found all of this discussion today inspiring and encouraging, and I hope that it's opened your eyes a bit more to the entire pattern and story of the Mashiach. I'll be back tomorrow as we continue talking about Joseph in Egypt. Until then, may you have a great and amazing day. May today be for you a day of good news and good fortune, good health and blessing. And may all of your heart's desires come forth for the good and the merit of Messiah Yeshua. See you tomorrow, Bezrat Hashem.